I want to welcome you to the second episode of our Unpromptable Webinar Series. We've created this series to deepen the conversation around the L&D and talent trends that are shaping our industry this year and beyond. It has been an incredibly robust conversation, so we're holding this space every Thursday in March to exchange insights, ideas, inspiration around the ever-evolving roles of the L&D leader and their team. We kicked off this series last Thursday, so welcome back if you were there with us. If you missed it, no worries, you can still get the recording. And we have 2 more episodes ahead of us. So there's more to look forward to. If you haven't had a chance to check out our full L&D and talent trends report, we'd love to share that with you now. It's a deep dive into 9 key trends to keep top of mind this year. I'll drop that link into chat right now. We'll also offer that at the end, so if you miss it, no worries. Next, it is a pleasure, as always, to introduce our presenters today. I'll drop their LinkedIn into chat as well in case we have any QR code issues. Danielle Silver is a solution architect on the SweetRush team. She spends her time helping clients dream up ways to use emerging technology to elevate learning and engage their learners in new and exciting ways. Danny is not only knowledgeable, but a delight to work with and cares deeply about ensuring the success of her projects and clients. From the moment you connect with Danny, you'll know you're in good hands. Adrian Soto is the director of SweetRush's AI strategy. Although Adrian is deeply technical and loves to share knowledge, he can explain concepts in ways that make sense. You get a taste of that today. Adrian has a strong grasp on the ever-changing landscape of emerging and immersive technologies. At the same time, remains grounded, pragmatic, and understanding that business and instructional objectives come first. Just a quick word about SweetRush for those of you who may be newer to us. We were founded in 2001 and have been a strong player in the L&D industry for the past 25 years. In January, we joined the NIIT family of world-class learning services. We offer strategic consulting and are extremely well known for our engaging, effective, and innovative custom learning solutions, which include emerging technologies like virtual and augmented reality and AI-powered learning experiences. We also have an extensive network of high-performing L&D professionals and subject matter experts, and we love sharing the wealth through our talent solution services. Last but not least, it's been an honor to receive numerous industry awards for the solutions we develop with our amazing client partners. And now I will hand things over to Danny and Adrian.
All right, thank you so much for the introduction, Tiff, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. So I want to start our session a little differently by posing a few questions that really shift the way that we think about our roles in this new era of learning. We won't pretend to have all of the answers. In fact, we're on a similar journey of discovery. We're figuring out the ethics and the architecture of this new world right alongside you. And we've reached a point where we have to ask ourselves, how do we manage this responsibly? The questions you see on the screen are some of the ones that we're asking ourselves. They represent a fundamental shift in the relationship between the learner and their data. So we've spent decades tracking completions, but what kind of intelligence could we gather if we tracked a learner's curiosity, where they pause, what they ask, or what they skip? From this, we can gain incredible insight into how people actually learn, but it's also a new type of data to protect. And what about when an employee leaves an organization? Who owns that intelligence that they built? Does it stay in the organization's database, or is it a portable asset that belongs to the learner? Lastly, we want to give people the right to delete their profiles, but how do we do that without losing the high-level insights that help us make the training better for the next person? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on these. Which of these resonates most with the conversations that you're having in your own organization? Or do you have other burning questions that we haven't listed here? Please share your thoughts in the chat. I'll be watching as we go. And keep an eye out for a LinkedIn post after the webinar where we can keep this conversation going. All right, on to the next slide, please. Perfect. So, for most of human history, learning was an apprenticeship. It was ancestral and immediate. Imagine a father taking his son on a hunt, teaching him to track game, to throw a spear, to avoid predators. This wasn't a lecture, it was tailored instruction. It relied on what we call scaffolding and fading. So, the master helps you hold and aim the spear today, and as you get better, they step back and let you throw it on your own tomorrow. It was the most effective way to learn because the content was your life. It was perfect, but it did have one fatal flaw in that it did not scale. So, as the world grew, we then hit a bottleneck. The pressures of the Industrial Revolution forced us into the era of the classroom. We moved to a one size fits all model out of necessity. Few argued that the classroom was better than the apprenticeship, but when you have to train the masses with limited resources, it really was the only way to do it. We gained reach, but we lost that scaffolding. We started teaching to the middle of the room, and the individual learner became a face in the crowd. In the last 20 years, we simply moved that classroom to a screen. So this is really the SCORM era. We can now reach almost every employee on Earth instantly, but the experience remains fundamentally generic. We solved the reach problem, but we're still stuck in a one-size-fits-all architecture. We gave the learner a library, but we didn't necessarily give them a mentor. And that brings us to today. The breakthrough of generative AI is that it allows us to close that loop. We're finally able to reclaim the personalization of that original hunter and apprentice era, but keep the reach of the digital era. We can now create environments where the AI provides that scaffolding, offering help when you're struggling and fading away when you've mastered the skill. We're moving back to teaching the one at the scale of the many. And on to the next slide. So to make sure we're level setting here, at SweetRush, we define adaptive learning very broadly. It's an umbrella term for any training that isn't one size fits all. Think about it this way: a book, a video, a click next to continue e-learning module. These are not adaptive because person X and person Y have the exact same experience. But the moment the training responds to the individual, it becomes adaptive. So this starts at a foundational level with accessibility and learner preference. If person X chooses to read a transcript while person Y watches the video, or if the system adjusts its interface to meet a learner's neurodiverse needs, this is adaptive. It's an experience that respects the learner's agency and their unique way of processing information. Beyond the preferences, we've historically done this through human-led logic that, for example, tests out assessments that respect what you already know and branching scenarios where your choices actually change your destination. These are powerful tools, but they are manual. We've had to pre-program every branch and every if-then statement. It is effective, but it's hard to scale that level of nuance to every single learner. So now this is where the umbrella expands. With AI, we're moving beyond the pre-programmed playground. We're now able to offer AI-powered adaptation that happens in real time. So take dynamic content. Instead of us writing 10 versions of a case study, the AI generates the most relevant version for that specific learner. We see this with conversational AI, for example, where we move from static, correct or incorrect feedback to a one-on-one virtual discussion. We're even moving into true learning in the flow of work. Imagine an AI like Gemini, for example, or ChatGPT, watching as you build a slide deck or a piece of code, stepping in to remediate a mistake exactly when it happens. Or guided curation, so where the system doesn't just give you a library, it acts as a concierge using contextual data to point you to exactly what you need. The goal here is the same as it was in the apprenticeship era, to give the learner all of the training that they need and only the training that they need. The shift here isn't a replacement of our skills, it's an expansion. We're moving from a world where we have to manually architect every possible outcome to a world where we can use AI to make those outcomes happen at scale for every individual. So moving on to the next slide, how do we actually scale the apprenticeship model? Traditional e-learning is static. It's a fixed path where every learner follows the same next button. The AI adaptive model, on the other hand, is responsive. It's a dynamic experience that evolves based on the person interacting with it. To really understand how this changes the experience, we look at three key characteristics. First, it's proactive. Instead of waiting for a learner to fail a quiz at the end of a chapter, the system identifies gaps in real time. It notices when a learner is struggling or when they've mastered a concept quickly, and it adjusts the difficulty or the depth before they even realize they need it. Second, it's contextual, so it doesn't just know the subject matter. It understands the learner's specific world. It knows their role, their industry, their level of experience. It can take a generic leadership principle and instantly frame it within the context of a project that the learner is working on right now. And third, it's scalable. So this is where we break the bottleneck. Historically, high-touch mentorship was reserved for executives or specialized roles because of the cost. Now we can provide that same high-touch feeling to every single person in the organization simultaneously. And the goal here is simple. We want to create a learning environment that doesn't just inform the learner, but actually evolves alongside them. As they get smarter, the content gets more sophisticated. As they specialize, the content gets more specific. So how do we actually do this? It starts with context engineering. In the AI era, our job as designers shift. We are moving away from being content creators, where we write every single word on every single slide, and becoming context architects. We're no longer designing the what, we are designing the parameters and the guardrails that allow the AI to generate the what for the right person. So context engineering is much more than just writing a good prompt. It's about building a multi-layered framework that uses the AI to understand the learner's world. Think of it as the blueprint that ensures the coach doesn't just give a generic answer, but it gives the relevant answer. And to do this, we focus on three specific pillars. Firstly, the AI needs to know who is on the other side of the screen, and crucially, how to talk to them. We feed the system data on the learner's role, their seniority, their level of experience and expertise, but we also architect this perspective from which the AI responds. By defining the coach persona, whether it's a supportive mentor or a rigorous technical reviewer, we ensure that a new hire gets foundational scaffolding from a patient guide, while a senior VP gets a high-level strategy from a peer-level advisor. We're engineering the relationship, not just the data. Next is the environment. So this is where we anchor the AI in the organization's specific truth. We provide the approved content, the proprietary frameworks, and the methodologies that define how your company operates. It's not just generic leadership, it's your leadership principles. So this ensures the AI isn't hallucinating just from the internet, but it's teaching your specific playbook. And lastly, the constraints. These are the guardrails. We provide the AI with explicit examples of what a good response looks like versus a bad response. We show it the consequences of those outcomes, explaining why a certain response might be harmful or off-brand, for example. By giving the AI these comparative benchmarks, we ensure that it can self-correct and maintain the high standards of an organization. And now I'll hand it over to Adrian, who can get into some of the more technical details behind context engineering.
Thanks, Danny. I wanted to share a little bit on what goes on behind the scenes. In addition to the creative direction and UI UX development, AI-powered learning content fundamentally depends on three key components for effective learner engagement. So those are the AI foundational model that you're going to be using, the context engineering you're going to be creating, and a comprehensive learning design. Usually, organizations leverage advanced large language models such as Google Gemini or OpenAI's ChatGPT, Anthropic's Cloud, or even Microsoft Copilot as the foundational processing base. However, these models cannot be implemented in their default state. As they tend to produce generic responses, we also have little control on how they work, and they may not align with specific organizational needs or workflows. To address this, as Danny mentioned, we employed a strategy known as context engineering. This approach involves tailoring and guiding foundational models using information relevant to the organization and its training objectives. By doing so, we ensure the delivery of relevant content, authentic learning experiences, and actionable feedback, The learning design component remains equally critical as our learner designers determine the most effective methods to achieve the project's educational goal. And together, these plus the AI model provide the base for the successful delivery of AI-driven learning solutions. So to Ian's point on the chat, this is where we would add all that learning theory that he is mentioning. Context engineering also uses components such as knowledge bases, prompts, and retrieval augmented generation or RAGs to prime foundational AI models with data that helps them support the learning experience. To build a strong knowledge base, we leverage a company's existing materials, such as videos, PDFs, and other resources. Then our learning designers collaborate closely with the client to craft effective prompts, and our developers bring these elements together within the RAG system that ultimately powers and governs the experience. Together, our context engineering and the different AI models made for some of the amazing projects you're about to see. Danny?
So to give you a tangible example of these principles in action, let's look at a project that we developed for a global hospitality group. They recently rolled out a real-time guest messaging platform. The challenge wasn't just teaching people how to use the software, it was teaching them the hospitality of the digital conversation. So how to provide accurate information while maintaining the brand voice. We built an AI-powered simulation that replicates the actual messaging platform. It's a safe digital sandbox, if you will, where team members can practice interactions before actually interacting with real hotel guests. Because the AI isn't following a script, it can respond to how the learner responds. If the learner is too blunt, for example, the guest is less satisfied. If the learner is empathetic and accurate, the guest satisfaction score goes up. So we're giving them the opportunity to master the nuances of service recovery and guest delight in an environment where it's safe to make mistakes. And Adrian can jump in and speak to how we adjusted the context engineering in the back end of this example.
Sure. So here the context engineering is multi-layer and purposeful. The designers made deliberate decisions on what the AI needs to know at any given moment in the simulation, and that included the guest persona, the emotional stakes of the scenario, and the hotel service guidelines, and a live tracking mechanism that monitors how the learner is responding. Rather than having a simple prompt like act as a hotel guest, they build a knowledge base that grounds the AI behavior in specific bounded parameters, keeping the guest's reactions emotionally consistent and realistic, while at the same time feeding the AI a rubric to evaluate the learner against. The RAG architecture here ensures that the right information is retrieved and injected into the specific AI model we used at the right time, so that the AI can play its role authentically and function as a silent evaluator, so to speak. Two jobs that require carefully designed coexisting context layers.
Then in the next example, we're moving from digital or text-based messaging to a face-to-face interaction. And so this really takes the stakes even higher. This library of immersive scenarios was designed specifically to let learners flex their problem resolution muscles. So when a guest is unhappy and is standing right in front of you, it can be challenging to find the right words in real time. This experience gives team members a safe space to put their skills to the test with authentic guest avatars. What makes this truly adaptive is the integration of voice detective technology. So there's no multiple choice buttons here, no canned responses. Learners use their own voices and their own words. And in the background, the AI is analyzing the learner's word choice and their intent in real time. By relying on their intuition rather than a script, learners engage in the kind of deep practice that actually builds muscle memory. So just like a one-on-one mentor, the system doesn't just grade a pass or a fail. The AI feedback delivers personalized guidance based on exactly what was said. The system evaluates whether the response accurately followed the prescribed methodology and whether the learner successfully communicated empathy. And so again, back to Adrian to talk more about the context engineering behind the scenes for this one.
Thanks, Danny. Here, the context engineering goes from a conversational tracking model to a feedback and evaluation model, which changes what needs to be injected into the AI model. The designers had to make deliberate choices about what the AI evaluator, here played by Hilton's AI robot, Vic, needed to know in order to give meaningful feedback, taking into consideration the specific problem resolution model the hotel uses. That model also used was used as part of the knowledge base. So when we were setting up the knowledge base, that framework was added to it. And the scenario the learner just watched and the transcription of what the learner was actually saying was also injected to the AI model at the right moment for processing. This project, which is interesting, we use several AI foundational models, including speech to text and text to speech to get it to work.
All right, and then on to the last example that I'll showcase here is an incredibly exciting project because of its relevance to the digital transformation happening across all of our industries. So here we partnered with a global architecture and engineering firm to achieve two key goals. First, we needed to align every employee within the organization on the AI principles, and then secondly, we needed to empower them to use AI confidently in their daily roles. The project provided a comprehensive approach to AI literacy. We began by giving learners foundational knowledge, covering everything from the company's specific AI principles and guidelines to AI output review, data security, and ethical considerations. This established a critical baseline for responsible AI use. Moving beyond knowledge, we shifted our focus to AI mastery. So here, and you can see on the next slide, we integrated two powerful AI features directly into the solution. First featured on the left is an AI chatbot. So think of this as an ever-present AI companion that's accessible across all e-learning modules. This allows the learners to ask clarifying questions or dive deeper. It truly tailors the content to their immediate needs. Second, we developed an immersive prompt engineering simulation, which you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. So here, learners practice writing effective prompts in response to custom scenarios highly relevant to their roles. This critical component allows them to build their skills and their confidence with the new tools in a safe environment. The true power of this entire experience lies in its custom-built backend. The feedback that learners receive is not only generated by the AI model, but it's also informed by a custom knowledge base containing the organization's specific AI principles and guidelines. This helps to ensure that the guidance is highly personalized, actionable, and aligned with the company's internal framework. And Adrian, I'll hand back over to you to dive a little deeper into how we approach that.
Sure. So context engineering here is doing double duty, powering two distinct AI features that have their own logic. For the AI chatbot, the engineering decision was, what gets injected alongside every learner question? In this case, the organization's AI principles and guidelines, and some data about which module the learner was currently in. Without that, you would get a generic AI assistant. On the other hand, here, with it, you get a companion that responds within the boundaries of the company's specific framework. The context is essentially saying, you are a tutor for this organization's AI philosophy, not AI in general. The prompt engineering simulation is where the context engineering gets more sophisticated. Each API call has to carry at least three things at the same time. The role-specific scenario the learner is responding to, the learner's actual prompt attempt, and the organization's rubric for what a good prompting looks like in their context. This third component is what separates meaningful feedback from generic tips. The designers had to make deliberate choices about how to structure and retrieve the right organizational guidelines so the AI evaluator stays grounded and doesn't drift into like generic prompt engineering advice, pulling from its training data specifically. What ties both features together as a unified context engineering strategy is that they share a knowledge-based common backbone. Dani?
All right, thank you. So, in order to achieve this and to move beyond a basic chatbot and into a true AI coach, we need to feed the engine four distinct streams of data. When these four areas intersect, we reach the sweet spot of true adaptive learning. And here's how we break those inputs down. The first pillar is learner insights. We're looking at data points like job role, seniority, and experience level. The outcome here is that the experience feels personal. It ensures the AI understands who is on the other side of the screen, adapting the language and the examples so they feel specifically relevant to that person. Next is knowledge tracing. This looks at past assessment performance, time spent on task, and identified skill gaps. The outcome is that the experience feels efficient. It allows the system to act like a GPS, automatically skipping what is already known and doubling down exactly where the learner is struggling. The third pillar is the knowledge base. So this pulls from company playbooks, brand voice guidelines, proprietary content, methodology, and frameworks. The outcome here is that the experience is accurate. This is your source of truth. It's what prevents AI hallucinations, and it keeps the coach's advice strictly grounded in your specific business rules. Finally, we have the external ecosystems. This pulls from HR performance reviews and project management metrics. The outcome is that the experience feels relevant. It allows the AI to suggest a learning moment not because it was assigned, but because real-world performance data suggests a need for it right now. And again, I will turn it back over to Adrian to show you the architecture and the logic behind an adaptive module that we are currently building.
Thanks. So moving into adaptive learning, what does all of what Danny just said look like? What you're seeing here is a simplified version of a real client project. It represents just one part of a larger research initiative we're conducting around adaptive learning. The original course followed a standard click next or scroll down format, so we introduced adaptive learning to make the experience a little bit more engaging. In select sections of the course, we are using GenAI to generate slides based on specific data points. This work also supports several secondary objectives, most notably understanding how learners respond to adaptive experiences compared to a one-size-fits-all approach, and identifying the key considerations involved when using AI and learner data to design adaptive learning experiences. Here's a closer look. So, next slide. So what data inputs are we using? In this particular case, we are collecting learner insights through a short set of questions. Before generating any AI-driven slides, we also apply knowledge tracing through brief assessments, while it's possible to incorporate additional data, such as performance in previous courses, reports, and other relevant company data tied to the course learning objectives. For now, we're only focusing in these two inputs. That information is then processed alongside the other components of our course's context engineering strategy. This includes defining a range of acceptable slide outcomes and running a validation process before the content is ultimately published. As you can imagine, this opens up a wide range of opportunities. For example, learners could develop their own kind of skills passport that could serve as the foundation for future adaptive learning experiences. We could also personalize content recommendations based on learners' individual goals, or even align them with the organization's priorities. But you know the saying, with great power comes great responsibility. This brings us back to Danny's initial questions. What are we doing with all the data that we're collecting? Who owns that information, especially when it's about me? And how do we balance learner privacy with the company's interest? With that in mind, let's take a look at a somewhat related example. Google Career Dreamer is a free experimental AI-powered tool developed by Grow with Google to help job seekers, students, and career changers explore potential career paths, identify transferable skills, and share their professional story. This is how it works. This is my profile, so, well, not entirely, but just for the sake of the webinar. So if you look at my profile, you'll see how I inputted my experience, education, skills, and interests, some of them, not all. From there, AI generates a career identity that suggests possible career paths for me to explore. This closely mirrors what we were discussing in our adaptive learning example. By collecting information, we're able to create something meaningful and offer tailored recommendations to the learner or to the user, in this case, myself. We also talked about how this new information could be reused for future learning experiences, such as updating learner skills profiles. But take a look at this. Let's say that for any number of reasons, like AI error, user input error, or a simple misinterpretation, cooking ends up listed as part of my experience. That little small change trigger this addition to my career identity, ranging from the precision of industrial maintenance and culinary operations to the complexities of software development. And in the next slide, take a look at the resulting career path recommendations. So I cannot read them. But so it says restaurant food and service manager. So remember, these are recommendations for me. Restaurant food service supervisor, chef, food and agricultural scientist. So a whole bunch of stuff that's not related to me, just by adding cooking to my interest. Here you see that misalignment with my actual interest. So yes, data-driven design, please, and lots of it. But we also need to be very careful. Dani?
All right, thank you. So I wanted to bring us back to those questions that I asked at the very beginning of our session. As I mentioned then, we don't pretend to have all of the answers. This space is evolving so quickly, and we're all learning the rules of the road together. But what we do know is that trust is the absolute foundation of everything that we've shown you today. As we continue to discover what's possible, we're looking at three core values that guide how we think about and protect learner data. First, we're exploring the concept of autonomy. We believe that adaptive learning should ideally be a choice, not a mandate. One approach we're considering is always offering a standard track. So if a learner isn't comfortable with the system using their data to generate content, for example, they should have the option to opt out and to complete a high-quality, non-adaptive version of the course. We want personalization to feel like an invited guest, not an intruder. Second is transparency. We want to move away from the black box feel of AI. We're thinking about how can we give learners the opportunity to see exactly what information was collected and how it was used to help them. For example, a summary could show them that because they identified as a team lead, the AI adjusted the scenarios to focus on conflict resolution. By showing the why behind the what, we can transform data collection into a visible, helpful partnership. And finally, we believe in sovereignty. So we're leaning into the idea that once the learning journey is over, the learner should have the final word on their data. We want to provide opportunities for them to perhaps reset or even delete their personalized profile. This ensures they remain the owners of their digital footprint, giving them the confidence to engage fully with the AI, knowing that they are in control of their own data. These principles are our starting point. They ensure that as we push the boundaries of what AI can do, we never lose sight of the human at the center of the experience. And as we wrap up today, I wanted to return to a foundational principle for us. AI is a tool to augment human intelligence, not replace it. The projects we've showcased today, from the complex simulations to our adaptive coaching frameworks, they didn't succeed because of the technology alone. They succeeded because of the critical human engine behind them. There is a level of intentionality, empathy, and strategic thinking required to build these experiences that is, quite frankly, unpromptable. Building impactful AI-powered learning requires a new kind of harmony across our design teams. We've had to shift how we work, but the human roles are more important than ever. It takes architects to engineer the context so that the AI teaches the right thing. It takes engineers to ensure that these systems are robust and secure. It takes creatives to ensure that the experience feels human and engaging, and UX specialists to ensure that the technology never gets in the way of the learning. Every project you saw today was the result of those humans working in concert. AI can generate content, but only humans can create meaning. And as we move into this next era, our value doesn't come from competing with the AI. Our value comes from our ability to direct it, refine it, and ground it in the human experience. This is how we move from simply distributing information to truly scaling mentorship. And so, with that, I will hand it back over to Tiffany to share some closing thoughts, and then we can open it up for some questions.
Wow. Thank you, Danny and Adrienne. You've given us so much to think about. Folks in the audience, if you enjoyed today's session, we would love to share our full L&D and Talent Trends report. It has only been out for a week, so you will be among the very first visitors to see it. I've dropped that link into chat just now. We'd also love to invite you back next week and the week after. Next week's session will focus on flow of work microlearning and live experiential learning. I will pop that link into chat as well so that you can save your seat. And now, as promised, we would love to answer any questions or learn about any experiences you've had around the topics that we've discussed today. I did see some questions coming in. I want to just pause for a moment and invite folks to share anything that they may have been wondering, thinking about. Thanks to those who've shared their curiosity so far. And while you're doing that, I will drop in the direct links to Adrienne and Danny's LinkedIn profiles.
Perfect. One of the questions that was jumping out at me here was around best practices for how to set up a RAG model. And I saw Adrienne responded saying that we could spend a whole webinar just talking about that, which we certainly could. But Adrienne, I wonder if we wanted to start there and just share a few tips and tricks for how we approach the RAG model in the back end.
Sure. I think there's two sides of it. One is comes from a learning designers. So how based on the project's objectives and the client's requirement, how are they defining how they're going to solve those learning objectives and presenting that information to the developers. So figuring out what's the best way to approach this from a learning perspective. And then there's, which something I think Ian and Russell mentioned, comes the learning theory part. Like from a learning science perspective, how are we making sure that AI is doing its work? We have a preset of what we're calling SweetRush essential value prompts and prompts that are designed specifically to tackle that. So all of that is given to the developers. And then on the developer side, there's common practices that apply across the board. So like vectorizing databases, chunking and indexing the knowledge bases, all that stuff. But that gets pretty technical. But essentially, that's it. That's like that balance between the learning objectives, the learning designers, the learning theory required to approach the project. Then the technical part is making that happen while at the same time creating an experience that's optimized, that's looking for the right information, that's staying within the boundaries preset or desired by the client.
And one of the most fascinating parts of that evolution for me, or to be able to see, was how deeply collaborative things have become, or the process has become between the learning experience designer, the engineer, and even the client. You know, there's a lot of collaboration and back and forth that needs to happen to make sure that the knowledge base, the RAG, that everything is working together as it should. You know, previously when we created e-learning modules or any kind of more linear, static learning experience, we all had our parts to play, and it happened in a very sequential way. The learning experience designer would write their part of it and then hand it over to the designers, who then hand it over to the developers, and it kind of passed along in that way. Whereas now there's less of that handover that happens, and it's more of a consistent collaboration that needs to happen. And so that's just been such an interesting evolution in roles to see. So we're no longer writing every single slide and every bit of content, but rather we're architecting that RAG and the knowledge base. So
Also, figuring out, going back to the title of the webinar, what are going to be my data points? What data do I need that to help here the learners again achieve that objective? So, and also figuring out if it's learner insights, how do you collect them? How do you get the learners not to answer like a 10 question thing before they jump into a course? And also generating that consistency. Do we do knowledge tracing? Do we bridge to other systems in the company to access information like performance metrics or past evaluations? Or, that's also part of the challenge, figuring out where do we collect those data points to bring into the project.
And all the data points that we mentioned today were very much around creating an experience and setting up an experience. But then there's a whole world of data that we can collect after the experience and how we use that then to iterate and to refine and to continue evolving an experience so that it is constantly better for the learner. So this is certainly a topic with so many facets that we could dive into. Let's
Thank
see
you
what.
so much. Oh, Heather's got a question here about, oh, Danny, it's about one of yours. Something along the lines of AI can generate content, but only humans can give them meaning. Oh, I remember that one.
Yeah, so AI is good at generating any content that we need these days. I mean, I'm sure we're all on a similar journey where we're relying on AI so much to help us refine an email or to create this document or I personally do in my role, I use it a lot to generate content. But I find that I need to spend whereas before I would be writing the content myself, now I'm using AI to generate that content. It gives me a baseline from which to work off of a foundation, which is sometimes easier than working off of a blank page. It gives me a foundation of content that it's generated, but I need to then come in and create meaning. I understand the context in which I'm going to be using this content. And, is it an email? Is it a proposal? Is it a document? Is it a presentation? Who is the end user that's going to be receiving this content that the AI has generated? So I, as the human behind the generated content, really need to come in and create that meaning and refine it and adjust it. Of course, AI is getting better and better at understanding deeper, nuanced context. But I still feel, and we feel in Sweet Rush, that it's still really important to have the human come in, first of all, evaluate the AI, the content that's been generated, and then refine it and adjust it so that it is really perfect for the context in which you'll be using it. Exactly, that final level of control.
Love that. Earlier, we had a question from Russell that might be pertinent here. Russell asked, can you explore the difference between an AI that is session specific and those that remember a user or learner over time in session? That is the difference between an AI agent and an AI learning companion.
Well, I think that the word AI agent applies to a lot of things. You could argue both are AI agents. The key here is actually in how you asked it, is that continuity. So memory and loops is a whole subject matter in AI. If it's a session-based, for optimization purposes, data and memory, if you will, gets stored or parked, and it could be accessed in different ways, but it's not as complex as having something that's readily available and constantly growing. So that's like a looping thing. So the AI assistant that's constantly with you is looping that information, adding, having it available, constantly there with you. There's this whole conversation around that eventually in the future, that AI companion is going to be suggesting what courses you're going to be taking and also probably making them for you because going to know, it's going to be the who knows better or the best information for you particularly. But yeah, I think the difference is more in how you make them from a technical perspective and where the data lives and how you access it.
Thank you, Adrian. Oh, Michael's got a follow-up question. Michael says, we might want to train on a new product, but worry that the AI will use the source material for training the AI itself. What suggestions do you have for balancing the need to capture AI's capabilities with the protection of proprietary enterprise information? Or is this subjective because it mostly depends on the enterprise relationship or contract with the AI provider?
That's an interesting question. There are different ways to do them. Unfortunately, it's expensive because you have to have either an instance or a service of the AI foundational model that is assigned for you that probably would later require updating, depending on how much power do you need for the AI model. You can even set up a large language model within your company's infrastructure. So you're making sure that all the data is within your network. That's another way of doing it. And then, of course, there are companies that provide that service. But yeah, the hardware side is what's going to trigger the cost. So it's completely doable, but there is a cost to it. Then you can also mitigate that through context engineering and how you set up the rack, which is usually what we would do. But yeah, there's some technicality to that. But yeah, maybe we can discuss later.
Thank you, Adrian. Kathleen's got a question as well. What kind of training programs are companies willing to invest the money to develop this adaptive learning for?
Ooh, I'll take that one. I love all things use cases. So, and as we shared in the beginning, adaptive learning is so powerful in that it's respecting learners' time, it's giving the information that they need when they need it. So there's so many, that applies to any use case really. But some of the ways that we're creating adaptive learning and use cases that we're building it for, some of which I showed today in terms of hospitality training. So those really nuanced personal skills. In the same vein, we're seeing it for leadership training. So perhaps having a conversation with a colleague, we really want to practice those deep interpersonal skills, whether it's coaching, whether it's giving and receiving feedback. So that's sort of on the more corporate side of things. On the healthcare side, we're seeing it in terms of having difficult conversations or challenging conversations with patients, for example. So whenever there's nuance that is not necessarily able to be tracked by a correct, incorrect kind of feedback box, that's when it becomes really powerful to create these kinds of adaptive simulations because we're able to assess the nuance in between and we're able to give people really personalized feedback based on their responses. Also, the AI example that I showed a little earlier for the architecture and engineering firm, here we gave them opportunities to practice writing a prompt. So those are experiences that allow for deep practice, that allow people to build their confidence. So moving a little bit past the foundational level of content, though adaptive learning is also really powerful when it comes to foundational content. So really we see it across the board. It depends on where your high impact areas are. And we would love to connect and understand more about your industry and perhaps we could have a brainstorm because we could talk about this for hours.
We absolutely could. And I know that we do have to close up. I see that there's a question from Russell about how do you establish stewards to govern these AI quote unquote beings. I think the question of stewardship is something that we talk about a lot. What might we be able to say about that?
That's a conversation that's very well. It could be lead some dark roads Because people some people say that won't happen, some people are saying that it will happen. At least we look at it more related to our context, which is learning, the AI specifications and requirements that we need to do excellent learning content and all that is not an area for that particular concern. So we try to stay practical in the context and take those AI and the different tools and apply them to our needs. And we're fortunate that that intelligent beings problematic is not really affecting us right now. Maybe later. Who knows?
For now, we remain optimistic. All right. Thank you, Jan, for that. I think that about covers it for now. Folks, if questions do occur to you as we close up here or later today or thereafter, please do let us know. We're going to open up a little LinkedIn chat so you can share it there. You can connect with us directly. We'd love to chat more. We always love to answer questions and just, like Danny said, brainstorm a bit together. So thank you so much for sharing your curiosity with us today. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here.